Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at the Sun and Rising sign horoscopes for the month of October. In this video, I'll be taking a look at the fire signs in particular, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So it's a big month. Again, 2020 has delivered a lot of intense months, but this one is no exception. It starts off with a full moon right away. There's a lot of action in terms of big planetary aspects, squares and oppositions and things like that. So I've narrowed it down to those transits that I think are going to be the most potent, and we'll try to unpack it for you. We're going to start with the fire signs here today. Like I said, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So we'll go ahead and start at the beginning of the month with Aries. If you are an Aries sun or Aries rising, here's what the forecast looks like for you. So on October 1st, at the very beginning of the month, you're going to have the full moon in your home sign and first house. That is really, at this moment, putting an emphasis on a theme that's going to be there all month long, which has to do with the difference between your own personal will and way and the needs or demands of others, or the way in which you're being asked to compromise with other people in your life. It's straight up across this axis that most of the action is happening this month. Let me run through a few other important dates. So if you go forward just a little bit more to October 13th, I'll show you what this looks like. On October 13th, you're going to see that Mars and the Sun are opposed across this exact same axis. And then on the 16th, just about 2 days later, you're going to see the new moon forming in the 7th house of Libra as well. So you've got the full moon in Aries, a Sun-Mars opposition across the 1st and 7th house, and then a new moon in Libra in the 7th house. And that's all taking place between the 1st of the month and the 16th of the month. And that really tones the cycle for you this month if you're an Aries rising. Now, with Mars retrograde in your 1st house, that means that an exploration, again, of will, power, strength, and determination might be a big part of the month ahead, especially with the question about relationships and the need for diplomacy, agreement, and harmony with other people. How are you navigating or negotiating different kinds of challenges or personality conflicts that are coming up in your life with other people? It's a time where you may feel limited or restricted, or you may be doing some very deep level of personal introspection with your home planet, Mars, retrograde in your 1st house. And if I had to give my, Aries friends any advice this month, it would be to allow for deconstruction of your motives and methods, your ways of getting things done, your way of expressing or asserting yourself in the world. It may not be working in the way that you're used to, and that's okay. Allow for there to be a kind of cosmic compromise this month. And don't be surprised if important new teachers or people come into your life by virtue of there being a new moon in your 7th house as well. And some degree of whether or not you're capable of surrendering or setting aside your own self-interest for the sake of someone or something else that offers an opportunity or something like that would be at the top of my, list of educated guesses for what's going to happen this month. But also just how are you working through different kinds of power struggles in relationships as an overall theme. And again, that how are you dealing with frustration or the feeling of being personally prohibited on some level? Or maybe it's a time where you're really turning over a new leaf within the context of a relationship, or because you're changing somehow, you're attracting new kinds of relationships into your life. So that's my forecast for Aries in terms of the big, like the 1st half of the month. Those are some of the very big transits. Now, the other thing is that these energies will also be playing out in terms of the 10th house, because throughout the month, you're going to have Mars making a whole series of aspects to Saturn at the very start of the month, just pushing away from a square to Saturn, then to Pluto by October 9th. And then let's see, where are you? And then Jupiter by October 18th. So the 10th house also is involved this month for you. And the 10th house has a lot to do with your work in the world. So as you're negotiating these, what I want to call interpersonal dynamics this month, which is sort of a keyword for both Libras and Aries rising or sun signs this month, there's also this question about, at least for Aries rising, how that interacts with your work in the world or your sense of where your life is heading in the future. There is a kind of tear it down and build it back up feeling in your chart this month, in my opinion, and the need to make or make a heroic effort or take on a challenge, and also to be persevering and determined. But these relational challenges could find their way into the workplace or could be closely related to some pretty profound changes happening in the workplace with these three planets, very explosive planets that have been there all of 2020 together, are getting back together again with your ruling planet Mars squaring all of them. So it's a kind of like, I feel like maybe there's a few signs like this month, but Aries probably the sign that has the most at stake this month, I would think, in terms of relationships, work, and personal identity. So now there's another interesting transit between the about right around October 7th. I'm going to go back down to that one. On the 7th, you're going to notice that Uranus and Mercury are opposing one another across your 2nd and 8th house axis. Likely this is a transit that has something to do with some financial surprises or sudden shifts and changes related to your money, your debts, your financial obligations or burdens, maybe with an emphasis on new ideas or new technology or a different way of doing something, some degree of inventiveness, defiance, rebellion, as well as, again, the themes of kind of liberation and freedom in relation to money and finances. That comes up really strongly right around the 7th. And then it comes back later in the month on the 19th when Mercury will oppose Uranus once again. So you got a couple of moments this month where the very excitable, kind of erratic and unpredictable qualities, but also very inventive and liberating energy around money and finances, both your own and those things that you owe to other people or that other people might owe to you. Those topics are going to be repeating this month several times. And Mercury is also turning retrograde in the 8th house, which could bring up debts from the past or things that you have to rehash with other people that has that aura of a karmic debt behind it. And you'll see Mercury turning retrograde right around the 14th in Scorpio in your 8th house. So those are some of the big transits of the month. October 17th, there's another one that I want to sneak in here, which is Venus will oppose Neptune. I would look at the topics of sickness and health in relationships, or the topic of health, cleanliness, disease, maybe questions about traveling in relation to the topics of health and sickness, and also a kind of an aura of romantic, imaginative, and what do I want to say? It has a very romantic aura around it, this transit, which could be really enjoyable. But with Venus in its fall in your 6th house, I would also watch for the potential to be enamored by something or to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, and it could get you into some trouble. So be careful. Just keep your eyes open around the 17th for that. At the same time, anything that is humanitarian, compassionate, filled with the desire to help or heal others, that could be a good thing as well. Be careful of the desire to save someone or to look for a savior. That comes to mind with Venus opposite Neptune. So those are the big ones. October 31st, finally, there is a full moon in Taurus at the very end of the month. I'm not going to fast forward the chart here. In your 2nd house of money and finances. So at the very end of the month, again, we're seeing that there's a lot of emphasis on money this month. I think this is a month where Arians are going to find a degree of greater financial freedom or flexibility or new business opportunities or something like that, because you have this exalted full moon in your 2nd house of finances, a couple of very break off the chains looking transits from Mercury to Uranus across the 2nd and 8th house. So I think that it's a month where things are going to, by the end, I think things will have shifted somehow financially for you, probably for the better. But don't be surprised if there's a little erratic or, kind of unexpected energy, the curveballs that Uranus throws. All right, so we are going to wind it back up and do it again for Leo. So I'm going to go ahead and put Leo on the ascendant, and we're going to go back to the beginning of the month. Here we go. So if you are a Leo rising, the full moon in Aries and a lot of the energy of the month is going to fall in the 9th house and across the 3rd house axis. Let's just start by saying that this full moon in the 9th house with Mars retrograde in the 9th house, making a boatload of aspects this month, is going to, it puts the spotlight right into the house of religion, spirituality, higher learning, education, teachers and teaching, possibly long travel or foreign countries. So those topics are a huge highlight this month if you're a Leo. The full moon in Aries, obviously it's very Marsy, Mars retrograde in that house. I think about what I am and am not willing to fight for, what I need to take a stand for, or what is my mission or vision. In other words, how are your beliefs mobilizing action in your life? Or what is the relationship between your beliefs and the kinds of actions that you take in the world? This is a good time to try to get those two things on the same page a little bit more. We're also talking about possibly confrontations or conflicts relative to ideas, thoughts, beliefs, teachings, teachers. And we can also see that there's going to be some need to find a balance between your own mind, your own thoughts, and those of, maybe teachers or wisdom traditions or a particular paradigm or something like that. For example, a lot of people will go into yoga teacher trainings, and I just remember, remembering this from doing a lot of teacher trainings with my wife. And each person has to kind of figure out, how does this fit into my life? How do I express this uniquely? And how do I find some degree of confidence in what I'm saying and strength without also being domineering or feeling like, you have to have confidence in what you're saying, but you also sometimes need more experience before you can have the confidence. And yet, the confidence is sort of a prerequisite to putting yourself out there. It's this weird catch-22 in life where, how do you find a certain degree of confidence in what you're doing and thinking and saying and how you're behaving in the world? Sometimes you can't have that until you get more experience and have certain kinds of conflicts and struggles. So it's also natural, and don't worry if that's a part of what you're dealing with this month. So the full moon in Aries on the 1st, then we have the sun opposite Mars on the 13th. I'll just push this forward a little bit so that you can see what this looks like on the 13th. So here's the opposition between Mars and the sun, same exact themes. And then on the 16th, just a couple of days later, you're going to see the new moon in Libra in the 3rd house. My sense is that diplomacy and tact and learning how to be agreeable with others while also carving out a very defined sense of what you stand for or believe in is going to be an important part of this month. And that could play out especially in terms of how you communicate with people right now. It might be the hard thing you may be called to be a messenger of some kind this month with the new moon in Libra in your 3rd house. And you may have a message that's hard to deliver or people to speak with that aren't easy to speak with. So those are some of the tests that I see ahead if you're a Leo rising. Now, throughout the month, that Mars is very dynamic, and there's just fuel being poured on it all month long because of opening square to Saturn, a square to Pluto on October 9th, a square to Jupiter by, October 18th. And that is going to energize Mars considerably. And from the 6th house, it's how am I rising up and meeting or dealing with misfortune? How am I dealing with sickness or injury? Or how am I being of service in the world? Or how am I putting my beliefs into tangible, productive, action in the world? Service, perhaps, or sacrifice of some kind. And also injustices. For example, the 6th house sometimes is related to servitude or even slavery. Mars in the ninth house retrograde might have an interest in trying to be free from some kind of burden or unfair labor that's been, put on your back or your shoulders by someone or something else. So this is a month also of fighting for your dignity, or of setting boundaries in terms of, what you're willing to do or not do, or sacrifice or not sacrifice, and whether what you're doing and how you're spending your energy or what you're sacrificing for is actually in line with what you believe. Those are probably some of the big, sort of broad brushstrokes that I would use to describe this powerful series of squares from the Mars retrograde in your ninth house to the Capricorn stellium in the sixth. If you're traveling, I would be careful of hardship or difficulties while traveling this month if you're a Leo rising or Leo sun as well. Now, a couple of other energies that I think are significant this month. Mercury is going to be opposite Uranus, and that is happening on October 7th. And then I'll highlight it for you right here so you can see. And then Mercury will turn retrograde in Scorpio in your fourth house on October 14th. And then it comes back and opposes Uranus again on October 19th. So a couple of oppositions from Mercury to Uranus from the 4th to the 10th, and then a big Mercury retrograde in Scorpio in your fourth in general. Another topic that I would say is like an undercurrent this month, because obviously planets in the fourth house are sometimes a little less visible or more subdued, but still very powerful and effective. But an undercurrent, the strong undercurrent this month might have to do with matters pertaining to home, property, family, parents, land, your living environment, your inner life. And whatever's happening in that sphere, there's a revision taking place, a looking at the past or a revisiting of old themes, maybe somehow related to family or home. And as those things are happening, they're going to get into this very electric and dynamic kind of conversation with Uranus in your 10th house, which has to do with your career and your outward activity in the world. So as there is this pretty deep examination of the roots of your chart this month, the things that prop you up, the most foundational elements of your life, and pretty deep emotional territory in that area, whatever's being uncovered there is going to create some pretty dynamic and perhaps sudden and even sort of erratic shifts with regard to what you're doing in the world, or kind of how you show up in the world. And you can notice those, again, a couple of key points. Mercury opposite Uranus October 7th, Mercury turning retrograde in Scorpio on the 14th, and then Mercury opposing Uranus again through its retrograde on the 19th. So watch for those dates in terms of that, your inner life or the base of your home and family. There's some changes there that are going to blossom out and have an effect on your life this month. And don't be surprised if it catches you off guard a little bit, because that's how Uranus tends to be. Now, the other another major transit that I would cover here is Venus is going to be opposite Neptune right around October 17th. And that is across your second and eighth house, the financial houses. My advice here is, don't drink the Kool-Aid. If someone's selling you something, or you want to buy something, or there's questions about doing business with someone and it seems too good to be true, it probably is. It's a transit that can easily, across the financial house, lead to almost like delusions, and you may not have all the information that you need. And so I would be very cautious around extravagant purchases or really idealistic new ideas or choices regarding money. Of course, it is possible that debts are forgiven, or that there is some element of grace, sharing, forgiveness, generosity, compassion, charity. Those themes could come in a little bit, but be careful of the glittery stuff that tempts you with some kind of immediate big gain, or, this will take care of all of your problems, or something like that. That energy is pretty quick, but it comes in, October, right around October 17th. And then finally on the 31st, there's going to be a full moon in Taurus in your career house. Really pretty good. It's an exalted moon, right? So that full moon in Taurus on the 31st suggests that there's going to be a real a manifestation of changes that, remember, these changes, they are being pushed this month by that, this the Mercury energy. Mercury's retrograde in the 4th house. Let me just push it forward so you can actually see it. So here's the full moon coming through on that day. And you can see that that full moon is going to activate Uranus again, now in an opposition with the sun. So it's that same feeling of like from roots in the inner life and the private sphere, the family life, out into the world. There's this big dynamic shift that happens by the end of the month. My sense is that it's sort of broiling or roiling, however they say that, boiling underneath the surface, like where you can't see for a while. And then it has these big moments of starting to become more externalized, especially around the 19th when Mercury opposes Uranus via retrograde, and then with the full moon in Taurus on the 31st. But it does get started as early as Mercury opposite Uranus from the 4th to the 10th on the 7th of the month, or even the 14th when Mercury turns retrograde. So watch for that this month. Pretty powerful month, right? Okay, well, that's what I've got for Leo. So we are going to wind it back again. We're going to do it all over for Sagittarius. Get to the first of the month, and we're going to put Sagittarius on the ascendant. All right, so here is Sagittarius rising. Now, again, at the beginning of the month, we have the full moon in Aries, and that full moon in Aries is making its opposition, of course, to the sun in Libra, and then you're going to have Mars retrograde, eventually opposing the sun in Libra, which happens by the 13th of the month. And then right after that, by the 16th, you're going to see a new moon in Libra. So it's a big 5th and 11th house axis month for you. Here is the opposition right around the 13th. You can see the sun opposing Mars from the 11th to the 5th. And then a couple days after, on the 16th, you can see the new moon. So here's the new moon forming just a couple of days after the opposition from the sun to retrograde Mars in the 5th. So that's where a whole lot of the emphasis on October is for you if you're a Sagittarius rising. Now that puts these two areas, which are generally pretty good houses, the house of Jupiter and the house of good spirit, the 11th, the house of Venus and the house of good fortune in the 5th. The 11th house is associated with friends, groups, benefactors, and allies. And the 5th is going to be related to good fortune, but usually that has more of the connotation of the things that you take pleasure in, that give you joy or personal happiness. That could also be associated with a more private sphere of life where, what do you do with friends in the evening when you're hanging out just to have some fun? The 11th house tends to have more of the connotation of who are your allies in the larger sphere of life with your ambitions, your career in the world, things like that. So right now, the way that anytime you have an opposition across this axis, there's usually questions about, especially the Libra involved, what kinds of compromises and agreements are you willing to make with others, especially when seeking important allies or allegiances in the world? And how does that compete or conflict with your own personal need for happiness? For example, sometimes we're asked to get involved in a group or commit more of our time to some kind of effort. And we know, oh, hey, that could be really good for my career. That could really help me, with my my artistic ambitions or something like that. But we're hesitant to commit because suddenly we realize it's going to take a lot of time, and that might be very draining or taxing for us. And we might not be able to feel as relaxed or as content or peaceful as we normally do. It's a very typical 5th house, 11th house dynamic. The other thing that can come up is going to be about, the 5th house is a little bit more like I march to the beat of my own drum, whereas the 11th has a little bit more of that flavor of I'm joining with an effort larger than myself. Both houses tend to be very supportive in terms of our, in terms of personal happiness, growth, success in the world. Both houses tend to lend their support, but there's almost like competing forms of support for you this month if you're a Sagittarius that may lead you to having to make some difficult choices. What am I prioritizing here? What is more important to me? I think it might be an embarrassment of riches too, where there's different options that are both good options that you have in some sphere of your life, and it might be difficult to make a choice. The other thing is that if you have children, this could definitely be a month where your social life, their social life, and their behavior is, or their health on some level, mental health, emotional health, whatever, isn't, a part of the conversation. Mars retrograde in the fifth can bring difficulty or conflict around the topic of children or pregnancy, or even let's say if you are someone who well, let's just say your kids are in school and they're having some kind of behavioral issues at school. That would be a Mars retrograde in the fifth house kind of moment. Now, and so you can imagine that there's important choices that you have to make because you belong to a larger community with different things that you have to balance, different considerations that you have to balance when it comes to how you raise your kids and what kinds of things you'll take a stand for and for the sake of your kids, and which kind you may have to compromise on. Which fights are worth fighting with an administration or a teacher or something like that. Another thing that comes to mind again is with pleasure, and what forms of pleasure are very selfish, and where might I need to reach out and join with other people, bigger, focus on something bigger than myself and my own pursuits or my own interests. Okay, now this is being fueled all month long, this Marsy, very Marsy month with the full moon in Aries, right at the start of the month in the fifth house. Mars is going to square Saturn at the very start of the month. It's still squaring Saturn. It is then in a square with Pluto by October 9th. It then gets into a square with Jupiter by the 18th. And that's it's like adding gasoline to a fire. And the energy is coming from the second house in your case, which is the place of finances. So I would call it a kind of undercurrent that's there all month long. It has something to do with financial considerations, big, intense financial choices that you have to make. Or, for example, money, and how is money related to your children right now? And also, I mean, this is the kind of time where if I saw this transit, like I would say, oh, it's possible that your child could be coming back home to live with you again. Or, in the rare case, I guess sometimes parents have to go live with their kids. The reason for this is that you're seeing a connection between potential hardship or challenges around money or finances and some kind of real shift related to your children at the same time. It's also possible that there's something that you want to give your resources or assets to. Children are, your kids having a baby, so you buy them a car, or you buy them a crib, or I mean, if you have enough money to buy them a car, that's pretty cool. But if you I don't know, you do something to help them out. Some use of your resources that is selfless or that sacrifices or delays your own gratification or pleasure also comes to mind this month. And then again, I wonder about the potential for there to be big, challenging choices about your own creative direction or your future direction with a company or an organization relative to the topic of money or finances. So those are some of the big ones that when you start getting the stellium from Capricorn in the mix. Now, there's also a couple of oppositions from, let's go back. So you get to October 7th, you're going to see an opposition between Mercury and Uranus. This is in your 12th house. Mercury then turns retrograde by the 14th, and then will oppose Uranus one more time by the 19th. So several aspects from Mercury to Uranus, with Mercury turning retrograde in Scorpio in the 12th house. I think this is a month where Sagittarians could learn something shocking, or you have to be very careful of like gossip or manipulation or betrayal or secrets. And also, this is not the month to break into someone's cell phone or computer to see if they've been talking to someone else. You know what I mean? Like top values would be privacy. Be very discerning in what you say and who you share things with. The potential for like erratic thoughts, words, communication, or sudden unexpected outbursts, or what do I want to say? Yeah, disclosure or revelation of things that have been hidden is a potential, and it would probably be a little bit more damaging in these house positions 12 and 6. So steer clear of it. Don't go looking for it. If it comes up, sit with it for a while before making a decision, because Mercury retrograde is going to give you a process through which you need to take some time to reflect more deeply upon things. And also, if there is stress and trauma coming up in any way, especially information that comes to light or something like that, try to reflect on how did I participate in the creation of this story, because that's always a good thing to do in the 12th house Mercury. It's a good way of reflecting on elements of our own self-destructiveness. Okay, now October 17th, there is an opposition between Venus and Neptune. Now, that opposition forms, it's very brief, just a couple of days, but it forms between, say, the 17th, right around, you could go 16th, 17th, 18th, right in there. That's between the 10th and the 4th houses. That's a brief little window where the topic of romance and love and the potential for, like I've been saying to everyone, don't drink the Kool-Aid when Venus opposes Neptune, especially because Venus is in its fall. There are themes like surrender, forgiveness, and what do I want to say? Healing available to us in relationships and in love. But there is also the potential for there to be deception, dishonesty, illusion, intoxication, both in the workplace, around home and family, and in intimate relationships. Just for a couple of days there, right around the middle of the month, that may spike up a bit. Considering that Mercury is also doing that opposition with Uranus, I'd be very careful about watch your motives for why you're saying things and doing things, and try not to get manipulated or be manipulated. Okay, now, last but not least, the very end of the month, on the 31st, there is a big opposition, a big full moon in Taurus. You can put that right here. So yeah, the full moon in Taurus will be happening on October 31st, and the sun will be opposing Uranus at that time. It's another big moment of revelation. And I think it's an interesting transit because, the full moon in Taurus is exalted and it's with Uranus. So it has this look of greater freedom, greater independence, liberating yourself from something difficult. But the difficult part is still there. The liberation is coming from something that has been difficult or something that has been confining or limiting or restraining. And there's this moment of breakthrough, but it may not be easy. And that's what I'm seeing toward the very end of the month for you if you're a Sagittarius, meaning it's almost like a rain cloud or the humidity kind of breaking open. And there's a little bit of a deluge. After it all settles down, it's like, whew, the heat's gone, the humidity's settled down, and I feel a lot better. But there is still the thunder, the lightning, and the rain that has to split open a little bit there. You might notice that toward the very end of the month. All right, that's what I've got for you. I hope that you fire signs have a great month. Please feel free to leave your comments and share your stories as we go throughout the month. Pay attention to the monthly overview that I did for October. I go into greater depth and detail with everything. As always, I unpack these transits throughout the month as well. So stick around and you'll probably get more if you watch the successive videos that I do on these transits as the month unfolds. Don't forget that my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts on November 14th. Class is filling up, still room if you'd like to sign up. It is a whole year of studying ancient Hellenistic astrology and learning how to read charts for other people. You can check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. There's need-based tuition. We try to never turn people away who are hurting and want to study astrology. So if that's you, feel free to check it out, especially if you're struggling due to COVID. We have an exception for that written into our little, guidelines for who's eligible. And we also have the early bird rate in effect right now. You can save $500 off. And there's also a payment plan if you need it. Hope to see some of you in class soon. I hope you guys have a really great month of October. Take it easy. Bye.